Hey friends, I came across this passage this week and I want to talk about it because as I was listening to my audiobook this week, The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he comments on these few passages and I want to summarize them very quickly. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 17 through 24. There's two specific verses that I want to highlight. The first one is verse 20, where Paul says, "Let each of you remain in the condition in which you were called." And the second one is verse 24. In whatever condition you were called, he says, brothers and sisters, there remain with God. Now, in verses 17 through 20, he's talking about circumcision, whether you're circumcised or uncircumcised. He says, this is nothing, but obeying Christ and keeping his commandments, that is everything. Then in verses 21 through 24, he talks about, bond servants and being a slave to somebody. And he says, whether you're free or not free in whatever the situation is, make sure that you are following God to the best of your ability in that present condition, now more than ever. And why this is so profound is because Bonhoeffer's teaching this idea that our circumstances should not limit us or prevent us from following God. Should not prevent us or inhibit us from being able to follow him. I remember when I was younger, I used to have this very immature mindset that I felt like I had to be at a certain point in my life spiritually. I had to so control and manipulate my circumstances to make everything perfect in order to really feel like I'm following God or serving him. But Paul puts that to shame. And he does that later, I'll talk about in 1 Corinthians, where he says, if anyone shouldn't be able to serve God, it is me. He says, I shouldn't be an apostle of God because I was persecuting and killing the apostles of God. But because of God's grace, he's elevated me as an apostle, and I'm even doing more than the current apostles. So this is a huge, profound thought and revelation for Paul himself as someone who persecuted the church, as someone who could not escape his circumstances of his past as being a murderer for the church, and yet God was able to use him profoundly. So all that to say that Paul says, in whatever condition which we have been called, we can remain in those conditions. And not only do we remain in those conditions, but we remain with God and we serve him, and we don't let those conditions prevent him or control our ability to serve God.